So, how are you guys doing? Yeah. Just after lunch, right? And it's afternoon, it's probably, we're trying to make this fun and interesting. You could tell we're all from San Francisco. I have a sweater and a jacket, right? And it's super hot here. A little bit about myself. My name is Liao. I'm from an organization called NICOS Chinese Health Coalition. We are, anyone heard of NICOS before today? You look familiar. Where do I know you? Oh yeah, okay. So some of you may have heard of NICOS. We're a small nonprofit in San Francisco's Chinatown. I actually started at NICOS as an intern in 2006. When I first started at NICOS, one of the first projects I worked on was problem gambling. I had no idea what gambling addiction was, what problem gambling was. I used to be a substance abuse counselor. I used to work in Santa Clara County with Asian American adolescents who were incarcerated because of substance-related issues. So I knew about people who were addicted to chemicals like alcohol, drugs, but I didn't know that for some people gambling could be as addictive or even as destructive as substances. So I started doing this project. It was kind of ironic that I started doing this work. I was going to all kinds of places like middle schools, high schools to raise awareness, to colleges, universities, and to professional groups like social workers, doctors, nurses, to let them know about this issue. I found out later that someone in my own family was actually a problem gambler, and nobody had any idea. When we found out that my stepdad was a problem gambler, he had pretty much lost everything. We were on the verge of bankrupt. We were on the verge of losing our home that I grew up in. My mom had borrowed, my stepdad had borrowed from the wrong people, so we had loan sharks coming after us, right? My stepdad at one point even thought that if he killed himself, he would get rid of the loan sharks permanently, so he actually attempted suicide. He was not successful, so he lived, but through that process put my mom through a lot. They were divorced, but you know, he's no longer in our lives. Do you think his gambling problem still impacts us today? Because of the money, right? My mom actually took a lot of personal loans herself. We're still paying off about 5-6 credit cards today. My mom owed a lot of money to personal friends too that we're still trying to pay off today. So addiction doesn't just affect people who are addicted, right? It affects all the people around them too. So hopefully after this presentation you'll learn a little bit more about the signs and know how to identify that in some of the people that you might know. I'll let my coworkers introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Maya. I'm a project coordinator at NICOS, and my background is more in the mental health side, but I'm learning more and more about gambling addiction through working at NICOS.
Hi, my name is Ceci. I'm an intern at NICOS. So this semester I'm still an SFSU student. Does anyone know SFSU? First day, yeah. So as I'm interning at NICOS, I learned much more than just a little bit about problem gambling.
Okay, so sorry, our clicker doesn't work with this PowerPoint for some reason, which is why I'm hovering back here. But so we're from NICOS Chinese Health Coalition, as you've heard, and we are based in San Francisco's Chinatown. And we were formed in 1985 as a coalition of 5 Chinese organizations that were concerned about the health and well-being of the Chinese community there. So NICOS stands for our 5 founding organizations, which is NEMS, Northeast Medical Services, which is an Independent Provider Association, which is a network of doctors. It's now called
Chinese Community Healthcare Association.
Okay. And then C is for Chinese Hospital, and O is for Unlocks Lifeways, and S is for Self-Help for the Elderly. Have you guys heard of any of those organizations before? Great, yeah, they still do really important work in our community. And so our goal, like it says up there, is to enhance the health and well-being of NICOS. The Chinese community. Do you want to talk about
Sure. So how do we get involved in problem gambling? It's actually by accident. We did a survey in 1997 where we asked about 1,800 Chinese Americans over the telephone about health questions, like, do you have regular doctors? How often do you go? What are some of the reasons you don't get health care? Like, is it too expensive? The doctor doesn't speak the language that you speak. And one of the questions we asked was a social question. We asked them, what do you think is the biggest social problem in your community? And surprising to us, gambling was the #1 answer. It was ranked higher than gangs, it was ranked higher than domestic violence, other prominent health issues. So we went from there to develop a program, I think there's one more, about a range of free problem gambling services, from hotline to free counseling to also this free prevention and training that we do with all kinds of people. We'll talk more about resources too at the end.
Okay, so some of our goals today is just to raise awareness about problem gambling and talk to you about what gambling addiction looks like, how to recognize the signs, how it impacts the Asian American community, and then we'll also talk about some prevention tips as well and what you can do to learn more about it and help educate your friends and family. So, I'm going to turn it over to Sissy to talk about what gambling is.
All right, let's talk about gambling. So how will you define gambling? Raise your hand. There's no right or wrong answer, so you can just yell out the. How about, yeah?
Taking risks that you can't afford to take.
That's pretty good. What else? Again, there's no wrong answer, and you don't get F if you answer wrong, so you can just yell out your answer. Yes? Yeah, I heard the word risk twice. So how we define gambling is gambling refers to any games of chance or skills that involve a financial risk. And the next is that how we define. Can you name some type of gambling? Yes. Bingo. Yeah. Ta-da. Yes.
Does it count as gambling if the success of a net, like the expected value is greater than 0? Like let's say 51% of the time you will hit the draw.
So it doesn't matter about what the potential outcome there, is there. Based on our definition is if there is some kind of risk, right? Doesn't matter how low or how high it might be. So based on how you interpret this definition, do you think the thing that you're thinking about qualifies? Is there a risk involved?
Well, there's a risk involved though. A lot of decisions we make. I'd say gambling
Yeah.
would be defined by an important.
Coming to school is a gamble, right?
Yeah.
So what were you thinking about?
An inordinate amount of risk. Like there's a difference between a gamble and an investment, especially in the stock market, is often a very thin line.
Good. Yeah. Can anyone else name some type of gambling activities? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. How about you? Mahjong. Yes. How about you? Yes. In casino. Yes.
Lottery ticket?
Lottery ticket. Yes.
Sports.
Sports. You guys answer everything. I don't have to present it. Because like first lottery, then casino, poker, slot machine, and then the sport gambling. And this is. Does anyone know what game is that? Yeah. Who's saying? Yeah.
Vietnamese people. Every New Year we pull that out.
Oh.
Yeah.
What is it called?
Yeah. What is it called?
It's called bao cua, like in Vietnamese, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's called we just call it bao cua. But yeah, it's just basically like a game where you have a bunch of dice and you roll it, and then whatever face it is, you know, and if you put money on like a particular thing and the face matches, like you get double that or whatever you put down.
Yeah. You know, I didn't know about this game until today. I learned from mine.
Yep, Vietnamese in the house.
So then this is the cord racing, and then this is. Do you know what is that game is?
Cockfighting.
Yes, that one. Also, some people also like to bet on dog. And this one is online gambling. This one is stock. Someone mentioned that. And this one's mahjong too, which is you mentioned it. Okay, you guys are very good. So it's one thing that I like to share is very common that about gambling. Most adults have gambled in their life. I gamble too. So I mean, in my life once. So who has gambled before? Like you can be very honest. Raise your hand. Be proud in a new year, right? It's a culture thing. All right. So right now I will have Mike to talk about the design of game.
Yes, thank you. All right, so as Sissy just established, most adults have gambled in their life. It's very common. But what we're here to talk about is problem gambling. So when that game of entertainment turns into something more than that. So we're going to talk about the warning signs and look at a spectrum of where people lie with gambling. So most people are in this green yellow zone up here that you can see called social gambling, and that's people who play for fun, who see it as a form of entertainment, who can do it a little bit and then leave the game and not think about it again. So that's about 80% of people fall into that category. And then there's the at-risk category, and that's the one between social and problem gambling. And these individuals may be progressing to have a problem. They're showing some signs of having an issue. And we estimate that about 10% of gamblers are in that range. So for problem gambling, which is the majority of what we'll be talking about today, is defined by someone who has gambling problems that interfere with their life, either psychologically, physically, socially, or vocationally, so either with work or school. And so we estimate that to be about 2 to 5% of the gambling population. And then at the very severe end of this, we have something called pathological gamblers, who could be diagnosed by a mental health professional as having a gambling disorder. And that is probably about 1 to 2% of the population. So what about professional gambling? Where do you think professional gambling would be on this spectrum? I didn't put it up here. Yeah, what do you
I'd
think?
say it's dependent on their accurate understanding of the risk they're taking and whether or not they're betting in life savings.
Right, I totally agree with that. I think a professional gambler could be anywhere on the spectrum except for in the non-gambling category. Because it's not about how much you lose, but how much you can afford to lose. And so if a person is gambling an amount that they're okay with losing, and they're not constantly preoccupied with gambling, they do it like a job, like any of us would do our job and go home and leave it behind, then they could be a perfectly safe gambler. But if it's something that's on their mind all day long, and they're starting to lie about how much they're betting, losing control of it, then they could be a problem or pathological gambler. So great answer. Okay, so let's talk about some signs of problem gambling. So what are some signs that you guys know of other types of addictions, like alcohol or drug dependence? How would you know if someone is using too much drug or alcohol? You must know someone who uses too much alcohol. You're no one? Okay.
I guess you kind of went over it already. Or, you said that they know that it's bad for them, but they keep doing it anyways.
Okay,
And then
yeah.
also if they're like constantly preoccupied with it, and like that's the only thing that they're really trying to do. Like when they have to do something else, like their mind is still on it.
Great. So preoccupation with it. I saw another hand. Yeah.
It affects their other activities, or it takes a toll on their life in other ways.
Okay, great. So do you have an example you want to give?
Like it would affect their schoolwork or their work.
Okay, great.
I think also when it becomes like a solution to the problems when it's not supposed to be the solution.
Okay, yeah, so using it to cope with issues in their life. Any others? Yeah, in the back.
Every time you partake in it, it's like in excessive amounts rather than like moderate.
Okay, so yeah, they don't have a safe level of doing it. It tends to be overboard every single time. So that's great. So a lot of the things that you already know about addiction are also true with gambling addiction and excessive gambling. So some of the signs are thinking about gambling all the time. So whether they're in class, with a friend, they're thinking about that next big win, when they can get their next bet down. Increasing the amounts of bets. So we didn't talk about this one yet, but have you guys heard of tolerance before? With drug and alcohol use? So you need to use more and more of that stimulant to get the same high as you got before. And so we see that with gambling as well, where people need to put more and more money down to get that same thrill that they were getting. Becoming emotional or irritable when trying to cut down. I think all of us can relate to this a little bit when you're trying to cut down on junk food or something like that. It doesn't feel good, right? But this is to an excess. So when people try to stop gambling, try to impose limits on themselves, it doesn't feel good and they start feeling emotional and irritable. And missing important activities at school, in social and family life. So we've already talked about that. Maybe gambling too late at night, not showing up to class the next day, skipping work in order to go to the casino, things like that. Gambling to feel better, so using it as a coping mechanism. Some additional signs engaging in illegal activities in order to get money to gamble. Trying to stop gambling but failing, which is something we already talked about before. It becomes very difficult to stop. Relying on others to bail you out, so borrowing money from loved ones, promising to pay it back, gambling more than you have. Going back to try to get even. So it doesn't feel good to lose, right? And we all know that when we lose money, but some of us can walk away and see it as the loss, as the fee that it costs to play that game, but others just can't let it go and feel that they need to go back, gamble more in order to get that money back. Lying to important people about your gambling activities. So lying about how much money you've gambled, where you've been when you've been gambling, things like that. Any other signs that you guys could think of that might be an indicator of a gambling problem? All right. So let's take a look at a scenario and talk about whether we think this person is a casual gambler, or if they have a gambling problem, or if they even have a pathological disorder. Can someone with good eyes read this out loud for the group? Thanks.
A single father spends every other Saturday at the card room playing poker. His 2 children have an at-home babysitter, but the last couple of times he came home without enough cash to pay the babysitter. He says he usually wins and the extra money will go to his kids' college fund. The weekend is the only break that he gets from work and the kids.
So what do folks think? What's your first impression? Do you think he's a casual gambler? Does he have a gambling problem? Or is he at risk of developing a gambling problem? What do you think?
I think he's a problem gambler just because he says he usually wins. I mean, but clearly he's not winning enough to pay the babysitter, for the kids, so he's not winning, so I think he's either like in between, like at risk, and he has like serious issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's maybe in denial about how much he's actually winning from these games.
Right.
What are some other signs of a problem that people see? Was there a hand in the back? Anyone? Yeah.
There's an avoidance of family, and the money that he could be spending on the babysitter, he could just be saving, but he's spending on the babysitter and now having to win the money back.
Mm-hmm. So he should have already had enough money to pay the babysitter and not use that money for gambling, right? Yeah, how about you?
Well, I'd say at the point that he's spending the amount of money that it costs to pay a babysitter, it doesn't seem like he's gambling that much. At the same time, the problem is more that he's taking from the babysitting money to conceal this problem. It's a sign that we can address.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, do you want to ask me?
And also, like, he's neglecting important aspects of his life. Like, for example, the only time he has to be with his kids, he's using it to go play games instead.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think? Do you think this person has the full-blown disorder? What do you guys think?
And that would be like 4 or more of the what Mike had shown.
So what are some hopeful signs that you see in here that maybe he's not at rock bottom yet, that we can still talk to him? Yeah.
I think because he's gambling on a schedule, not like by impulse, that it's not really bad to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So he's doing it every other Saturday. So it's not like he's gambling every day or even every week. It's every other weekend. What are some other signs that are positive or hopeful? Yeah.
That he has a job that pays enough to pay for a that one babysitter.
Yeah, so he's presumably making some other income, and so he hasn't become so preoccupied that it's getting in the way of his job. That's good. Anything else? Yeah.
He has the desire of putting away the extra money for his kids' college fund and not furthering more gambling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he has some financial goals that he's trying to work towards. Great, you guys did a great job analyzing this situation. So yeah, I would say maybe, you know, he's possibly in the at-risk category. He's a great person that you could reach out with some of the tips we're going to give you today, just to let him know what some strategies are to make sure that he doesn't become a problem gambler. All right.
That was fast. Okay, so Asians, we're born to gamble, right? Do Asians gamble a lot? How many of you are old enough to be in the casino? Or you maybe walk through? How many percent, you know, just walking through. How many percent would you say of the clients or the patrons are Asian, would you say, on the times that you've been there? Is it significant? Quarter? More than a quarter?
More than a quarter.
Half? More than half?
More than half.
Okay, so it kind of depends on where you go to. A lot of the Bay Area casinos, sometimes we've seen reports of from anywhere from half to up to 90% of the clientele are Asians. Why? Why do Asians love to gamble so much? Any thoughts? Okay, so maybe some of the things we talk about will shed some light. Oh yeah, I'm
The
sorry.
stress reliever from just like normal vacations.
Okay, stress reliever, right? A lot of our clients like going to the casino. They're like, oh, you know, they treat me really well.
We have like a social activity.
Okay, so a lot of people use it as a social activity. People go together on those buses, right?
Some games, like for example, Mahjong, might have a strong cultural heritage. Like
Good.
my dad had a friend who actually lost 10,000
Wow, an MJ in one game or?
I think that was actually one of the better cases.
Wow, oh my goodness, that's scary. Is that over a long period of time?
No, that was one city, but in general,
City.
yeah.
High stakes, super high stakes. Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So sometimes there's a cultural component too. People kind of see it as they don't even see it as gambling sometimes, right? You know, it's just recreation. Anything else? Yeah.
In terms of sponsorship, does it require proficiency in English?
Okay, do you need to speak English to gamble? Right, a lot of times it's very easy, right? Just put money in, pull this. Now you don't even have to pull this, right? You just press a button. Very easy. Okay, good. So talk a little bit about, you guys may have heard of some of these stories. A while back there was a bus that carried a lot of mostly Asian seniors to the casino. This is not a casino bus, it's a third-party bus that contracts with the casino to bring people there, right? That actually crashed and many people were injured. 8 of the older adult, mostly Asian patrons were actually killed. They found out later that actually the bus driver didn't even have the proper license. It's one of those, you know, bus vendors that cater a lot to the Asian community. And the bus driver wasn't licensed to operate that vehicle on the way to the casino. There are all these crazy stories about individuals who actually lost so much money and actually not only took their own lives, but took the lives of their kids because they saw that as a kind of a mercy for them, that we don't want to grow up with all this shame and all this, you know, losing faith, that, you know, that there's all this debt that they have to deal with. Do you guys remember there was a family of 5 in San Francisco near City College that were killed, Chinese? Do you guys remember that? Do you guys know what's the connection to gambling?
I said never heard of it.
Never heard of it? Some of you nodded. Did you guys?
Do
Yeah. So apparently the alleged killer, the oldest son actually owed gambling debt to the alleged killer or the people that he's involved with. And he was there to collect the debt. And so something must have gone down wrong. He said maybe he wasn't going to pay, and he actually ended up killing the entire family, allegedly. Right? So a lot of stories like this in the Asian American community that you know, we also see in research that's reflected too. We hear a lot of the stories, but in research, most studies also show that Asian Americans seem to have higher rates of problem gambling compared to the general population. You don't have to look at all these little texts, I'll break it down for you, but you know, among college students, we see Asian Americans, I keep forgetting the laser pointer doesn't work on the TV screen. Asian American college students actually have the highest rate, I'm sorry, I keep moving, of problem gambling compared to other ethnic groups like African Americans, white American, Latino, Hispanic community as well. In San Francisco, we did a survey in, do you guys know Portsmouth Square? the Park Plaza in Chinatown. We actually, yeah, exactly. Who said that? Oh, okay. In Chinatown, we actually surveyed about over 100 people and found really, really high rates of problem gambling. I think Mai mentioned the national rate for problem gambling earlier. Do you guys remember what it was? Nationally, what was the rate for people who have problems with gambling? What percent? Yeah, 2 to 5. So you were right in the middle. Yeah, very good. 2 to 5%, right? That's relatively small or minority of the population. For the Chinese American in San Francisco, 14.5% met the criteria for problem gambling. An additional 21%, even more than that, actually were so severe that we could consider them addicted to gambling. So why such high rates? Even more in contrast, we see actually, this is a different slide. Southeast Asian refugees in Connecticut. This particular study found 60% of the population actually meet criteria for pathological gambling. The most severe, right? People who may be considered addicted to gambling. Why do you think the Chinese immigrant population, the Southeast Asian refugees may have such high rates of problem gambling?
Isolation from the communities that they're from.
Okay, so if we think about, right, I don't want to make assumptions about Connecticut, but do you think there'll be a lot of resources for people who are speaking Vietnamese primarily, who speak Laotian, who speak Cambodian languages? Maybe not as much, right? Sometimes the casino becomes the social center because you don't need to speak English to gamble. They have buses that come to ethnic minority communities that pick people up, make it really easy and accessible. Any other reasons why? Why would more Asian community use gambling as a way to escape? Or like, what is the reason for that? Why do they need to escape in the first place?
In some cases, it might be because immigrants are making more money than they did before they came to the country, and that might raise some incentive.
Okay, so that sounds like you're saying maybe after coming here having difficulties achieving the same kind of economic success as they have back home?
Like just the change in the amount of like just a change in circumstances such as how much is in their paycheck.
Perfect. Okay, so sometimes finding that maybe they were a doctor back home, maybe unable to find a job being a doctor because of licensure or language barriers or other issues, and some of them look at gambling as a way out. You know, that next lottery ticket could be my way to pay for my kids' college tuition, right? That next Vegas trip could be my way to move my family out of this neighborhood to a better home, right? So sometimes there's that aspiration too, right, for the hope and the dreams. So do you think it's in the Asian blood? Is it genetics? We're genetically predisposed to be addicted to gambling, right? Anyone agree?
One cultural aspect is if someone's success at gambling passes by word of mouth, that might attract others as well.
Okay, seeing other people's success? Okay, so stories like that too, right? We hear a lot about stories sometimes of people, you know, for example, out of the top 100 poker players in the US. This was back in maybe 2001, so I don't know if the figure has changed. Out of the, there's some magazine that put out top 100 poker players in the US. Do you know how many were Asian? How many percent? 9? 90. Sometimes feels like that, right? It was actually about 22, which, I mean, still is a lot, right? 22% of the top 100. And so sometimes the role models that we see in Asian movies, if we think about it, right? You know, a lot of you may have seen a lot of the Chinese movies on gambling, right? Stephen Chow had a couple of comedies or movies about gambling, right? And so a lot of imagery or kind of role models we see kind of tied to gambling. So, you know, that answers the question about genetics. We would expect if Asian Americans, it runs in our blood, that Asian countries would have really high rates of problem gambling too, right? We actually found that, for example, countries like Singapore that have large casinos, we have places like Hong Kong that have a lot of access to casinos, like Macau too, right? And places like where? Like Korea. The rates of problem gambling is actually pretty similar to Western countries. But when we look at immigrant populations, people who immigrated to Canada, Asians who immigrated to Canada, Asians who immigrated here, Asians who immigrated to Australia, tend to have higher rates of problem gambling. So there's an immigration factor, right? Sometimes we see that, again, there's a lot of stresses that comes with immigration. And so trauma doesn't just have to be like, oh, you know, I lived through genocide, I lived through war. That's obviously very traumatic, but do you think most immigrants go through some kind of trauma adjusting too? Like it's not always smooth, it's not always very easy, right?
Could one factor also be the fact that the person who's more likely to immigrate is also the person who's more likely to be less risk-taking?
Very nice. So there's also this possible personality predisposition, right? Some people say, you know what? Immigrants are already more prone to take risks. They took a lot of risks coming to this country already to find a better life, right? Maybe those people may be more prone to take risks ongoing. For example, there's one of the really popular Vietnamese poker players once was asked, like, you know, aren't you scared when you put down thousands of dollars on each hand of poker? And he was like, you know what? I was one of the boat people. I survived a lot just to get out of the country, right? We actually survived through crazy storms, running out of food, cannibalism, piracy, people who were coming after us. Compared to that, putting down thousands of dollars a hand means nothing, right? Doesn't really make me nervous about that. And so people may have different standards too. So that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up. In California, they actually did a study in 2006. They found that Asian Americans have one of the lowest rates of problem gambling. Does that sound right? What would you question about this study to find out whether it's conducted in a culturally sensitive way? To find out why the rates of problem gambling might be so low. Any questions you would ask?
Was it done just in English?
Was it just in English? And it was. They do have it was telephone survey, people call, random strangers calling you, right? And they have interpreters, but you have to talk to someone in English first. And you have to be able to tell them that you speak Chinese in English so that they could get the right interpreter. So what kind of problems would be with that?
Just with interpreters and phone calls, if like, let's say the language that they speak is number 9, you're probably not going to listen that.
Stay on the phone for that long. Yeah.
They feel uncomfortable talking on the
Yeah. Do I even feel safe that this stranger, like, where are you calling from? Why are you asking me about gambling? It's so personal, right? And so, you know, again, it's on the telephone too, not face-to-face. That may make a difference. We actually did a secondary analysis and found that of the sample that they surveyed, when they desegregated the Asian American data, right? Looked at, for example, by acculturation, whether they speak English as a first language or an Asian language as a first language. So people who are more acculturated, we assume, speaks English as a primary language. They found that they actually have similar rates of problem gambling compared to everybody else in California. But those people who actually speak an Asian language as a primary language were almost 3 times as more likely to have problems with gambling. And so again, there's that immigration or acculturation factor that pops up again, right? Real quick, some of the challenges for Asian Americans. Okay, so immigration-related issues like stresses and things like that. I mentioned a lot of them use the casino as a way to escape, like someone mentioned, right? To cope. Cultural acceptance. Is it really accepted, gambling in our culture? In many of our cultures? Sometimes it's so accepted that it's also difficult when someone has a problem, right? It's hard to see because you're like, well, everybody gambles a lot. And so how do we know when someone has a problem? How do they know when it's a problem? Target marketing. Do you think casinos, lottery, do they target Asian Americans? We'll talk about that and we're going to have some pictures to show you guys. Environmental, so for example, where can you buy lottery tickets?
A lot of gas stations and liquor stores.
That's right. And in Chinatown, it's almost like every other store. Right?
All the grocery stores.
All the grocery stores, almost every store, right? They're actually starting to look at that and see if they need to do some more regulation and control about that, just like with cigarettes and alcohol. Yeah.
At least with lottery tickets and state-sanctioned gambling, there is pretty much no incentive by the government whatsoever to discourage it, even if it is a problem, especially because they use that money to pay for a lot of their
Good point. Right? So a lot of times it's not just people who are addicted to gambling. The government, in a way, is addicted to gambling too, because once you start doing that, we also see that when states sanction gambling in places where they have state lottery versus places they don't, which is very few now, people are more likely to have a more positive attitude about gambling. Why? Because they're like, well, the government is selling lottery tickets too. How bad could it be, right? If the government says it's okay, how bad could it be? And so again, environmental prevalence is important, how accessible it is, and stigma of seeking help. Still difficult. We've been running the program since the late 90s. It's still difficult to get people to call our hotline, even though we have staff who speak Chinese. Still difficult to get them to come to us for help. For every 3 people who call the hotline, only 1 person will show up statistically. Out of 2 people who actually show up for services, only 1 of them would actually stay through and finish treatment, get counseling and everything. So this is similar to other addictions. People drop out very much, a lot, and it's difficult for people even to just come to the door in the first place to ask for help. Just like many other mental health issues in the Asian American community, right? Lack of culturally, and this is a lot of it too. We're still the only service in the whole country set up specifically for Chinese problem gamblers, and we get calls from all over the country, even though we're physically located in San Francisco area. So there's not enough services. Okay, so a few things about target marketing. Do you guys see a lot of Asians in media? Not a lot of portrayals, right? But, I keep meaning to put your friend's picture here. Her friend models, right?
Yes, for Silver Legacy.
For Silver Legacy.
She's Asian too, but.
So chances are good, if you see an ad about gambling or a casino in California, chances are good you'll see at least 1 Asian face, right? This is an Asian couple enjoying themselves in an MGM Grand ad, right? Look how much fun they're having. This is a bus shelter ad in Chinatown. We walk by this every day. This lady is actually Thunder Valley's Asian marketing director. And she also models for their ads in the Asian American community, or Chinese community. How many, and you guys are really far away, so it's hard for you to see. How many casinos can you count that is sponsoring this Lunar New Year festival? Anyone count more than 2? More than 3? 6? You said 6? Wow. Good eyes. Really fast too. Exactly right. 6. So out of this list, it's not that many, right? 6 casinos are already sponsoring the Lunar New Year Festival. Why do you think they're so keen on paying money to be part of the parade, part of the festival? Why?
Gives them access.
Access, definitely. How does that change public perception too? They're always there. It's familiar, right?
They're also seen as positively contributing members
Positive.
instead of parasites.
Good. Trusted members. They're contributing. They're making this possible, right? And so a lot of times they'll have a giant booth at these parades. NICOS will have our booth too. And we'll have giveaways like pens, right? And then they would be giving away cars several booths down. So, in our community, the voice that says, hey, gamble, is much louder than the voices that say, hey, think about being more responsible. Right? Think about, not losing everything. They hire from within. These are actual job descriptions that we found. Casino host, Asian marketing. Directors of Asian marketing. Sometimes some casinos, depending on where they're located, may have specific ethnic group marketing directors, like Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Filipino, right? In order to reach that specific segment of the population. And they all speak the language. familiar with the culture, know what works and what doesn't work, and so we'll tailor the environment and the whole gambling experience to make sure that they're happy, the clients are happy, right? A lot of them have also marketing directors for other groups, like this is a position for Latin American marketing director, and usually hiring bilingual staff. Making their places feel like home. You guys know what feng shui is, right? What is feng shui? Can anyone explain?
Like an ambient kind of thing, like a very, I don't know, I think it's very oriental, like it's just kind of like, yeah, very oriental.
Isn't there a series of traditions / customs associated with Taoism and like orienting the home to?
As it is saying, like orienting like the furniture to make everything like good luck and like good vibes and stuff.
Yeah. So it kind of boils down to arranging space to bring in the good flow of energy, right? Good flow of, and so a lot of casinos actually go as far as consulting feng shui experts to design their space. Do you guys know what the logo for MGM Grand is?
Lion?
Lion, right? Lion. They used to have this entrance, giant lion's mouth. People just walk through the lion's mouth. And then after a while, they're realizing that, hey, our Asian clients are going all the way around to go to the other entrance. They're avoiding the entrance. Why? And they're like, well, they consulted experts. And they're like, well, it's bad luck, right? Consider bad luck to go into the lion's mouth. So they actually changed the whole layout just for their Asian clients, right? So you can imagine how important Asian clientele are to the gambling industry, that they would kind of go as far as doing all this kind of tailoring. We don't see this in other places, right? We don't see hospitals designing feng shui for their Asian patients, right? That would be great. Okay, food, of course, good food that oftentimes very low cost, and wide variety of food that people who may be recent to this country may still be able to find something that is familiar to them, right? That's comfortable for them, that feels like home. They don't have to leave. They don't want people to leave to eat, right? They want everyone to stay there. And so good food. Entertainment, who knows Paris by night? Okay, it's the same hand as earlier. Can you say what it is? Who was the other person who raised it? Yeah.
It's basically such an annual, biannual like performance series held it's similar to like pageants, but it's like to display all the Vietnamese talent. Sometimes used as a preservation of culture, and sometimes as used as like displaying like our modernism.
Cool.
Yeah.
Kind of, they have kind of like a variety show, is it?
Yeah.
Singing and comedy and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Very popular, right? Sometimes you have to pay a lot of money just to see the show. A lot of these casinos offer it either at very low cost or even free. Even though they may be located in an area where there's not a lot of Vietnamese or Asian American community, because they know it will draw, right? They'll come. You guys see here 12 Girls Band. You guys know them from China? You guys all love Chinese opera, right?
No.
You got it on your iPhones and iPods, right?
No.
No? Who do you think that's attracting? Maybe our parents' generation or older generations, right? Okay, so all these are very ethnically specific. Again, buses. Where do the buses pick people up? Do you guys know?
Chinatown.
Chinatown. Oakland Chinatown, San Francisco Chinatown, other Chinatown, Koreatown. I don't know what they do in Japantown. But a lot of the ethnic minority communities, right? Do you have to pay? Do they cost money? A lot of times it's not that much, and a lot of times they'll give you incentives that makes it seem like you break even. You pay $15, you get a meal voucher, they may even give you free play tokens, things like that. Again, maximizing incentives like tokens and giving people reason to go. So I'll do the last part real quick and then almost done. So these are some of the things we teach people. So what do you guys think? True or false? In the long run, the more regular you play the casino, the more you lose. Longer you play, more you lose. Who thinks this is true? Who thinks this is false? Longer you play, you should have more opportunities to win, right? You say.
Well, no. I mean, I'm just saying it could be either or. Like, we could lose or win.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Even the movies glorifying gambling usually say the house always
Yeah,
wins.
even they admit that, right? Okay, so some people could get lucky, but the thing is, do they know when to stop? But in the long run, what we're saying is the more regular you play, statistically speaking, you're gonna have more losses than wins. So this is how all casinos operate. There's no casino that's ever went out of business because he was giving away too much money, okay? You have to remember that.
Statistically speaking, like just about every casino game is designed with 51% house
Very nice.
advantage.
Okay, we'll talk more about that, house advantage. So casinos know this. They want to keep you there longer. What are some ways you've heard of that casinos try to keep people there longer?
They like update your chairs so you're more comfortable.
Very comfy chairs. Kind of like this room. These are pretty nice.
They give free meal vouchers. They
Good.
give you free night stay.
Good. You don't have to leave. You sleep there. And you know this from what? Research, right?
Empirical research.
They bring you water and alcohol.
Alcohol, you don't need to leave your seat even, right? They're like, Coke, please. Okay, anything else?
Well, I don't know if this qualifies, but the slot machines are actually their biggest money makers because they require virtually no human input.
Yeah, okay. So you may be able to have a lot of machines and kind of have minimum staff to kind of just make sure things are okay and things are running okay. But having more slot machines definitely is an attraction. Yeah.
I've also heard slot machines being programmed in a way where, like, by the time you feel like you're losing a whole bunch, they kind of program it so that you win back a little bit of what you lost, so you think that your luck is improving, and then you stay there.
Very good. So slot machines are on a certain schedule. They program a certain ratio, but it's variable ratio, meaning that even the casino doesn't know when it'll pay out, but it's in an interval where you do get those occasional reinforcements, right? And this is why it's so easy to get hooked. So very good, you guys are so smart. So these are some things we've heard. Pure oxygen. Why do they pump pure oxygen above the gaming floors, you know? Keep you awake longer. You're not gonna be at midnight saying, oh, you guys, I'm tired, I'm gonna go take a nap. You're saying, hey, I'm in Vegas, I feel great, I'm gonna stay up all night, right? We've heard of other places that pump pure oxygen, places like Target, Safeway, so now I know why I'm always so happy when I'm at Target, right? They do that, yeah, real quick.
Are you sure if it's pure or just enriched? Because pure oxygen causes brain damage.
That I don't know. I'll let you research that on your own. Okay. No clocks, no windows. Heard that? Why? Why does that keep you there longer?
You don't know what time it is, so we just keep on playing.
Good. Okay. So they should do that too. No windows in this room, right? Oh, that big old clock right there too. So, easier to lose track of time, right? What about abstract cash? Are you using actual money at the table? You're trading it in for stuff like what? Chips, putting it on cards. So why do you think that makes them more money?
Plastic chips, in particular, are lighter weight, and because of that, you'll mentally assume they're worth less.
Okay, so it's also because part of it is also that you're not seeing the value of money, right? Over time, you're gonna lose track. You're thinking, oh, this is just a stack of plastic, and maybe the lighter weight, you're like all in, right? Doesn't matter, it's just a stack of plastic. And also, it's hard to keep track of machines, right? They actually you have to use those cards. You don't put money in directly, most of them anymore. And so they show as credits. They show like you have 4 credits left, 5 plays left. What does that mean? How much money is that? You forget, right? Free drinks, free massages. This is for real, okay? Last one, hideous carpets. Okay, this one's more like just kidding, but why? Why do you think hideous carpets make them more money? Any guesses? Who hasn't spoken yet? Anyone?
You don't want to look down, so you look at the machine.
So think about, it's true, that's one of the theories. When you walk into a casino, where do they want you to focus your eyes? Not on the busy, crazy looking carpet that they have, right? It's to focus on the levels of the games and things like that. Another theory, and I don't know if it's true, these are all theories, if you drop money, you ain't gonna find it. I don't know.
I found one.
Yeah. You found one? Oh, you were keeping your eyes on the
Yeah.
carpet. That casino's carpet wasn't hideous enough. Okay, so some of the things to keep in mind: randomness, independence of events, and house advantage. Okay, I only have little time. I want to get through everything. You could talk to me afterwards. Okay, you have a lot to contribute. Talk to me afterwards. Randomness. So one of the things you have to remember is that gambling is random. Every type of gambling has elements of randomness. Chance, things that you can't control. Even when you could practice, right? Poker players, do the best poker players in the world sometimes lose? It's because of randomness. Things they can't control, like the cards they get, how good other people are. Casinos and lotteries try to trick you into thinking you could actually win or control it. Are there skills in lottery? Can you practice? Practice scratch faster, scratch those numbers faster, or pick better numbers? There are no skills, but the lottery website actually has number statistics that you can look at. They show you how often each number has come up. Do you think people use that tool to choose their numbers? Does it actually help? No. So again, these tools actually make you believe you could win more than you could, right? What would you guys choose as your next 3 flips? If you have heads, tails, heads, tail, heads, heads, heads. What's the next 3 flips, most likely? Just shout it out. What do you think the high school students, the middle school students we present to, most of them like to choose? Which one?
Tail, heads, tail.
Yeah, seems more random. Some of them also, kind of get into all this, like looking for patterns. You're like, oh no, it's going to be D. You know why they like D?
Well, I would pick B because statistically speaking, it'll land on heads more often than tails by a small fraction.
We've got that a lot. But does that guarantee that the next 3 flips will be heads? Okay. So provided that if it's pretty close to 50-50, could any of those combinations be possible? So what we try to warn people is sometimes casinos are really smart. They show you all the past results, so that you could look at that and try to find patterns, which is a natural human inclination to say, oh, I see a pattern emerging. I'm smart. I'm going to outsmart them. I'm going to predict what's going to happen next. But you can't. That's called independence of events. Things happen on their own. Does the coin know what side it landed on last time? Does it care? Right? Those things don't affect the future. You should just bet on whatever you feel is right. The last one is house advantage, okay? So if all of you place a bet on this roulette wheel on either red or black, how many of you would win? Only on red or black? Huh? Is there another color other than red or black?
Green.
So those are called house numbers. Who's the house? The casino is the house, right? Whoever runs the gambling. And so a lot of wheels have even another green, 00. So if you all place a bet on red or black, after one spin, close to half of you would win. 49%, not quite half, because of that green, okay? Over time, the more of you start playing regularly, the more of you start losing. After 1,000 spins, statistically, only 19% of you would still be winning. Most of you would have lost money. This is how jackpots grow bigger, right? Most people are losing, and the casino's taking most of it, and then they also put some up for jackpot to entice people to gamble more. So some of the things we want to leave you with is if you do decide to gamble, set money limit, right? Decide how much you're going to bring. Don't think of the money that you bring as investment because you're not trying to make more. Just think of it as how much I'm willing to spend to have fun. This is how much it costs for me to have fun. Have a time limit because there are no clocks, no windows. Leave credit card, debit cards at home. Don't borrow money. Having a plan. Know your upper and lower limits. If I win this much, if I lose this much, that's when I'll stop. And you have to keep track. Okay, last part, resources. How do you get help for someone who you might know who has a problem? They can actually call one of our hotlines. 1-800-GAMBLER is easy to remember. They have people who speak English and Spanish. NICOS has a hotline that have people who speak English, Cantonese, and Mandarin, which is 1-888-968-7888. Why does our Chinese hotline have so many 8?
Chinese people like the number 8.
Why do Chinese people like the number 8? Why?
Sounds like prosperity. It's a homophone.
Sounds like fortune, prosperity, right? But sounds like what? Fat, right? So call us, you'll be lucky. You won't lose all your money, right? 24/7. You write that number down. It's on the brochure we're giving you too. And then there's actually free counseling available. And the last thing I tell you is just that if you know anyone who may have a problem, did you know that they could ask the casinos to ban them? Did you know that? They could say, hey, don't let me in. Kick me out if you see my face, okay? So most casinos will do that for you. You have to go to the general manager or security to sign up. And if they catch you, they kick you out. What if you sneak in and play, though, and win? You gotta go cash out if it's over 500, or if it's over a certain amount, you gotta show your ID, right? They see that your name is on that list, they say, oh, I'm sorry, you're not supposed to be here. We're gonna take your winnings and give it to the Office of Problem Gambling that funds us. Okay, so they don't get to keep their wins. What if they lose? Can they get their money back? No, they sign a contract promising they won't be there. They could even sue them for trespassing. Okay? So no reason to gamble if they can't keep their money, but you have to make sure people know that so that they don't get into trouble, right? Okay, we're gonna leave it at that. If anyone is interested to work with NICOS more on like a side project, we also have an event coming up this Monday. Yeah, on St. Patrick's Day, called Make the Change in San Francisco's main library. It's going to be a wellness event. If any of you is interested to volunteer for that event, please let me know. We still need more volunteers, okay?